Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I have yet another item for you guys and for us to talk about. And I've been talking quite a lot about archetypes, and I have yet another idea to talk about here. And then it's when it comes to your side characters, whether they are part of a group or they are friends or if they belong to like a secret society or something. And I'm going to talk about that in this video. But first, before I start, I want you to know that you can like this video and subscribe to the channel as well. And that helps us become more available to those who want to watch this kind of context, this kind of content. And that will be very much appreciated, actually. And you can also share this with your friends and your family, your coworkers, or maybe just here online. You can also comment away in the comment section, but do keep it friendly and polite. And finally, before we start, I'm not a native English speaker, so if I mispronounce something or I have something wrong or anything like that, or if something else is up, know that that is completely human. All right, let's start talking about the archetypes when it comes to side characters, like friends, like groups, like the individuals in the group, and that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna make myself a bit smaller, but I'm still here. So here we go. Okie dokie. Here we go. So as you can see right here on the screen, we have the cast from the Madagascar movies. And what's interesting about this franchise, as I've talked about it on a previous video, about when it comes to trilogies, because the Madagascar movies are a trilogy. And by the way, you can watch that video by clicking the cards. And but the interesting thing here is that this is a literal group, and they kind of work off on one another. And there's like a role difference for them. And although I have to say it borders on stereotypical, of course, because you have the lion, the zebra, and the giraffe are all males, and then the hippo is a female hippo. And of course you get the and of course you get the penguins and the lemur here that are also not really part of the group but important side characters. And by the way, I want to mention here for a moment too that I'm gonna go back to me for a moment that this is something you can do with your story too. Um, Oftentimes when we go for a protagonist, we tend to go for a male or a woman or someone of a different variety. And I've mentioned in a video that it could also be a creature, for instance, or an alien. And or you can have all of them, like together in a group, like a friend group. And I'm gonna show another example of that in a moment. But I wanted to mention here that you can just usually we go for one character to lead the story, whether it be a hero or a heroine. That's heroine as in a female hero, not the drug. Little joke. And but you could also just go for like a group element. So again, back to the smaller version of me for a moment, so you guys can see shit. So this is pretty evident for the cast of the Madagascar movies. You got three males and one woman, and then the penguins and the lemur, of course, and lemurs in the first movie, because there's like a whole freaking colony on Madagascar, with Madagascar in real life being the place for lemurs. and probably other places that I am not thinking of right now. And so, like, basically, another thing I want to mention here when it comes to this group of characters is that obviously the lion is pretty much seen as an alpha figure, which I also made a video about. Click the card for the video. And although Alex the lion in this movie is seems pretty much like an alpha, and I mean this in like movie terms and storytelling terms, not like in the way that we have in our modern day parlance, where we talk about alphas and betas and all that shit. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm really talking about like a leading figure or a follower. But these four, absent the penguins and the lemur king, are pretty much like equals to each other. They all have their own values, ideals, and abilities that they have. For instance, one of the things, well, like I said, it's a stereotype, of course, but it's still a valuable lesson to be known here. The lion is very much an alpha, a leading figure. In fact, in that second movie, Escape to Africa, we basically get like a Lion King plot in that movie where something happens to his family. And I want to backtrack here on another video that I've made before is that what you can do is make a backstory for your characters. Full video by clicking the card. Also, that makes your character more interesting. Like, introduce them as themselves, as an individual, but then reveal what you know about them after. So it can be a fun reveal. Like in this, like in the second movie, like I mentioned. So that, and I'll spoil it for a moment. So Alex the Lion initially is a New Yorker heart in heart, and he thinks that he has lived all his life in New York. But the truth is, actually, he came from a place in Africa where he was taken away by poachers, and that we return to that story in the second movie. And so I'm hoping that will not uh, be bothersome for you that I just told what the second movie is about. It's all about family drama. It's all about blaming someone for another one's problems and such. Very Shakespearean, almost. Okay. There's a few other kind of characters and casts that I want to talk about. Sorry, I lost my phone. I'm gonna go back to my. I want this picture for a moment. So I've talked ad nauseum before about the Harry Potter books and the movies, and I want to open up about those characters, those side characters that are in here, because, like I said about the Madagascar group, they're very much individuals in of themselves, but they work pretty well together, and that's almost again the same kind of thing that happens with the Harry Potter movies and the books, because those characters, yes, while we initially have our main hero, Harry Potter himself, we also get those other characters. You have a Ron Weasley, you have Hermione Granger, you have the whole Weasley clan. You get to meet new characters in the later books, Like in Order of the Phoenix, we get to learn about Luna Lovegood, who becomes a huge asset. Early on, we also know about Neville Longbottom, who in the first book stands up to his friends because they're about to do something supposedly forbidden. And then also we learn about his backstory and how that is also actually very relevant for the plot. I've mentioned in another video that Harry Potter, the Harry Potter franchise, uses MacGuffins pretty well. For that video, you can click the card. And also, there is so much to mention here because it's such a rich and well made franchise, I will say. Although I will mention as a writer, I think it's not perfect. And actually, hot take needs a rewrite. Although I will contend that the movies are a damn good adaptation, but they're definitely not perfect. And they don't have to be. Like I've said in previous videos before, adaptations need to stand on their own, apart from the initial scripture. And I mean, like, from the pages. With scripture, I don't mean like religious stuff. Not at all. And, well, of course, the setting in this franchise is a pretty important one because it takes place in a school, of course, with Hogwarts being the main setting, and of course, other places as well, because we get to learn about the wizarding world, which takes us, especially in that last book that definitely Hallows right here, to other places in Great Britain, and we learn a lot about this. So, a pretty good franchise with a lot of interesting side characters, both relevant and not relevant to the plot, but become valuable allies for Harry himself. And yes, while we do speak of like a main hero with him, with his name obviously being in the title, he does get that like, well, of course there is the part where they call it the Golden Trio with him and Ron and Hermione, of course, and then also other characters as well. Like I said, Neville, Luna, uh, Ginny, and many more characters. Of course, like I mentioned in Order of the Phoenix, well, it's also a literal organization as well. So we get to meet more of those characters. And we also get to learn about what has happened before. We learn about the Marauders, which personally I think they should focus on that when it comes to this franchise. I would love to see like a very good Marauders movie from the Harry Potter franchise. That would work like gangbusters if they have the right people and the right actors and all of that. So I wanted to mention that here. Okay. Well, since I'm talking about famous franchises, I'm gonna have to mention, of course, maybe the most well known superhero right now, Mr. Iron Man, Mr. Tony Stark. Obviously, the lead figure in the MCU, especially in the first couple of phases, as you can see on the screen right now. And obviously, the interesting question of what they're gonna do with the person that Robert Downey Jr. is about to play in the next couple of installments when it comes to the MCU, with him playing Victor Von Doom or Doctor Doom. I've heard a lot of interesting theories, and I'm excited for the MCU. I know they've gotten quite a hit or miss stuff these days, but I still very much enjoy myself. And what I wanted to mention here is that we learn of the greater world around him. We're treated to him as a solo character, as a as the person he is, how RDJ says in the Avengers. I'm gonna put up that quote from him because I do not know it by heart. Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. That he says in the Avengers movie. And that is also kind of the part that I wanted to go to with this part from the MCU. Initially, we learn about all these characters at first in the first couple of phases with this one, of course, with Iron Man. We learn about someone that pops up in the second movie, Black Widow, of course. Someone much later on, but still incredibly popular to this day. And I go for the MCU relevant Spider Man, who had his own trilogy of movies, and who's also interestingly working on a new movie, on their new movie, Brand New Day. I'm pretty excited for that. Okay, I'll go back to here. Uh, I know I've talked ad nauseum about The Lord of the Rings because it is my favorite franchise of all time, and those movies are absolutely perfect to me. Um, I've talked in a previous video about the cast of these movies as the characters in the movies, especially with the Fellowship of the Ring, and I'm talking about the group, not the film, being who they are, and you can find that video by clicking the card. And they all fulfill their own roles in these movies. I actually have a better picture of that as well. Obviously, you can see here the picture with Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn. I'm gonna take that other one though. So here's the one with them and Gandalf, all fulfilling their own roles because, well, like the word says, fellowship. So more than one character. So basically, what I'm mentioning here is that they all have their own roles to fulfill, like it is explained in the movie. But I'll explain it to you in a more modern day parlance for a moment. So basically, as the Fellowship falls by the end of the first movie, it splinters off into smaller groups as people go and do what they're supposed to do. So you have Merry and Pippin, the two other hobbits that kind of find their sides, find themselves in those two big places called Gondor and Rohan. They have Merry in Rohan and Pippin in Gondor. They have these three, minus Gandalf for a moment, who go and set off initially to look for Merry and Pippin and ultimately find him. I give a giant spoiler alert here in case you haven't watched it, but Come on, if you haven't watched Lord of the Rings, what are you doing? And which ultimately leads them, of course, to Mr. Gandalf in himself, of course. It's my phone. Which leads them to Rohan, gives us the two towers, of course, and obviously I haven't mentioned Frodo and Sam, who basically set off to get the ring into Mount Doom, of course, and they're then also accompanied by a new member who was not really part of the Fellowship, Gollum and or Smeagol, who is a very tragic character that we learn about. In fact, I want to mention here that we learn more. Sorry, we learn more about Gollum and Smeagol in the third movie at the very beginning, as it begins with how Smeagol got his hands on the ring, the One Ring from Sauron, and how that turned him into a wretched creature. Uh, yeah. So initially, the Fellowship of its different roles, characters with different roles. Obviously, we lose one of the members very early on, Boromir dying in action, being killed in action. Of course, there's some differences there, of course, with the book and the movie adaptation, with who does it. Initially, the same kind of way. It's just that in the movie they actually give the character a name, that being the Urukai leader. And yeah, so what I'm mentioning here, what I'm trying to make clear is that there is, there is someone that is to be seen as the hero of the story, and that is Sam, supposedly, for getting Frodo up to Mount Doom and so they can throw the ring into the frickin' fire. As iconically says, I know I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you on the slopes of Mount Doom, which he does. And that is his role, is to be Frodo's rock, pun intended. And because they're on a mountain, a volcano. And so, yes, initially we all think, yes, there's that big hero. Obviously, there's another person to consider, of course, and that is Mr. Aragorn, of course, who has his own arc in becoming a man and a leader of men, becoming king at the very end of the movies. I'm seriously not going to give a spoiler because if you haven't seen this, come on. While Legolas and Gimli kind of fulfill the role of comic relief and badasses at the same time as well, they don't really have a larger role, but they are very fun to watch, of course, which makes them relevant enough. And Lean, of course, as I've mentioned in that video, full video by clicking the card, an archetype of themselves, specifically when it comes to fantasy characters. Same thing with Gandalf. Okay. I think there's one more franchise I want to mention here. We're gonna use that I can't tell much about as far as I know. So I'm referring to the Maze Runner, which is a story about a group of kids getting into a massive maze called the Glade. And initially, and by the way, this is also an adaptation with some incredible faces that we know pretty well these days. As you can see those right here from Thomas Brody Sangster and Dylan O'Brien and Kaya Scodelario and Will Poulter. I hope I said her name the right way. Maybe somebody else. No. Okay. But basically, while you have your main hero, they're kind of represented as a group, as you can clearly see from these images right here, even in the. I'll just go for this one. For this one. Uh, yeah, so what I really wanted to mention here is that you can very much go for leaning into not just a man or a woman or a creature or an alien or heck a celestial being or some kind. You can go for a group as your main protagonists. Uh, well, you heard it right there. You can have your main protagonists be protagonists. It can be a group, and that way it makes it so interesting because it isn't done all that much. I will say having a group as your main protagonists, and but that makes it interesting. Exactly. Of course, as I said before, the only way that can work is if they are well established, have values, have their ideologies, and all of that. Be a person with an interesting backstory, and have them work side to side together towards a common goal. Because I feel that's the way you can make an interesting story when it comes to having a group as your main protagonists. And I know I say that a lot, but it's fully the case if you're making a story with a group as your main characters. It doesn't just have to be, oh, a female character as the main heroine or a boy as the main hero or a creature or an alien or whatever. It could be a group. It could be interesting. There's another franchise I'm thinking of, but that's again dipping into what I just said, and I meant the Hunger Games. I'm not gonna go back to putting up a picture for a moment, but basically, initially we also get introduced to Katniss as part of a group, as she says in that movie, "I volunteer as tribute," and that brings this video to a close, I feel. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening and watching to this episode of the FWX podcast. Before I go, you can like this video. You can also subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content. And I would love for you to do that. That makes us more available. It makes the podcast more available to people that like this kind of content. And I would love for that to happen. That you subscribe to the channel. Also, you can share this with friends and family or your coworkers or also just here online. It would be nice to have some feedback coming back from you guys. So please do all of that. And I hope to see you in the next episode of the FWX podcast. I've been Frederik, and I will see you in a next episode. See ya.